Dusty's empty ranch. The sun blazed on Dusty River's leathery skin as he tightened the cinch. Even the saddle groaned, burdened by the oppressive heat. Miniature cyclones of dust jittered across the barren fields, taunting his solitude. His ranch, once alive with activity, now echoed with spectral merriment and the poignant void of youthful play. Mounting Belle, the chestnut mare, he steered her toward the northern boundary. The steady thud of her hooves was a grounding rhythm in the yawning silence. He needed to patrol for breaches in the fence, a persistent struggle against wandering cattle from a neighboring spread. Halting by a wizened oak, he uncapped his canteen. The tepid water offered meager solace. He closed his eyes, and, briefly, Sarah's lilting voice echoed in his mind, playfully calling him Old Dusty as she wove pigtails for Emily beneath the tree's shade. He could picture Emily, all gap-toothed grin and flying ribbons, chasing butterflies in the waving grasses. His eyes snapped open. The vision vanished, replaced by the familiar hollow ache. It was 5 years since the wreck, 5 years since the truck had spun out on that rain-slicked asphalt, 5 years of quiet. He swallowed, the knot in his throat unyielding. Completing his fence-line tour, he noted a few spots in need of repair. Dismounting, he retrieved wire and pliers, the metallic bite of the tools a sharp counterpoint to the wildflower's sweet perfume carried on the breeze. As he worked, his gaze gravitated toward the Jenkins place in the distance. A swirl of dust billowed in their yard, likely kicked up by one of their dilapidated pickups. He held no fondness for the Jenkins clan, never had. Petty and avaricious, they were the sort who drained every last resource, leaving only resentment in their wake. He recalled Sarah's caution. Dusty, steer clear of those Jenkins. They spell nothing but grief. He should have heeded her wisdom more often. Repair complete. He mopped his brow with a worn bandana. Glancing again at the Jenkins farm, he noticed a figure step from the house. A young girl, slight and stooped, lugging a pail that seemed too heavy for her. Even from afar, her movement was hesitant, almost fearful. He frowned. He'd seen her before, always toiling, always looking diminutive. Her name eluded him, but she clearly had ties to the Jenkins. A ward they had taken in, perhaps, or a distant relation earning her keep through servitude. Whatever the truth, she appeared to bear the weight of immense burdens. He thought of Emily, bursting with vitality, always scampering, leaping, and demanding to be noticed. The stark contrast was jarring, a painful reminder of his profound loss. He watched her struggle to hoist the bucket over the fence, her face a mask of strain. He felt an urge to ride over, to offer assistance, to inquire if she was all right. But he resisted. He wanted to avoid entanglement, to remain detached from whatever troubles festered there. The Jenkins would certainly resent his interference. He convinced himself it wasn't his concern, that he had enough on his plate just keeping the ranch solvent. Still, the image of that girl, her fragile shape outlined against the unforgiving landscape, haunted him. As the sun began its descent, painting the heavens in fiery hues, Dusty turned Belle back toward the ranch. The familiar ache had sharpened, evolving into a disquieting uneasiness. He unsaddled Belle in the fading light, offering her oats from a battered pail. The steady grind of her teeth was the only sound in the yard. He spared another glance toward the Jenkins farm, but was now shrouded in darkness, the house a somber silhouette against the twilight sky. Inside, he kindled a solitary kerosene lamp, the wavering light projecting elongated shadows across the walls. He ate a sparse meal of beans and bread at the kitchen table, where Sarah used to conjure her celebrated apple pies. He could almost catch the scent of cinnamon and sugar, almost hear her humming along with the radio's melodies. He pushed the plate away, appetite extinguished. He wandered over to the fireplace, tracing the smooth stones with a calloused hand. He remembered building it with Sarah, each stone deliberately chosen, each placement infused with laughter and dreams. Now it was simply a cold, desolate void. He lifted a framed photograph from the mantel. Sarah and Emily, radiant smiles gracing their faces, their eyes shimmering with joy. He caressed their images with his fingertips, his heart throbbing with a timeless love. "I miss you both something fierce," he choked, his voice fracturing. He returned the photograph to its place and moved to the window, peering out at the inky expanse. The Jenkins farm remained unlit, silent. He wondered if the girl was asleep, if she dreamt of a better existence. He couldn't shake the conviction that he should intervene, that he couldn't simply stand idly by. But what intervention was within his power? He was merely one man, a solitary widower nursing a fractured heart. He sighed, the sound swallowed by the vast, star-strewn night. One truth was undeniable. He couldn't erase that girl's countenance from his thoughts. And he suspected that would prove to be a problem. A girl by the fence. The sun beat down on Lily May's thin shoulders as she hauled a bucket twice her size towards the pig pen. Dusty watched from the shadowed porch of his cabin, the air thick with the scent of pine and distant dust. He'd been telling himself to mend the south fence, but his gaze kept drifting to the Jenkins farm. He told himself it was only to check for strays, but he knew that wasn't the truth. Lily's movements were slow, burdened not just by the weight of the bucket, but by something else he couldn't quite name. Her head was down, her worn dress clinging to her small frame. He remembered Sarah at that age, all bright eyes and boundless energy, chasing butterflies in the meadow. The memory was a sharp, unwelcome shard in his chest. The midday quiet was shattered by Jedediah's booming voice. "Girl, get a move on. Those hogs ain't gonna feed themselves." Dusty saw Lily flinch, her pace quickening slightly. Martha Jenkins emerged from the house, arms crossed, her face a mask of disapproval. "And don't be skimping on the feed, Lily May. You think we grow money on trees?" Lily didn't answer, just poured the slop into the trough. The hogs squealed and jostled, their eagerness a stark contrast to Lily's quiet despair. Dusty clenched his jaw. He knew the Jenkinses. They'd always been mean-spirited, tight-fisted folks, squeezing every last drop out of everything and everyone around them. He'd kept his distance, minding his own business. But watching Lily, so small and alone, a knot of anger tightened in his stomach. He told himself it wasn't his problem. He had enough problems of his own, ghosts that rattled around in his empty house, memories that clung to him like cobwebs. He couldn't save Sarah, couldn't save his wife. He wasn't a hero. But still, he couldn't shake the image of Lily's bowed head, the way she seemed to shrink under the weight of the Jenkinses' words. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Dusty found himself in his barn. He hadn't been near the toy chest in years, not since. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the dusty lid. He could almost hear Sarah's laughter, see her bright smile. He opened the chest. It was filled with the remnants of a life that was gone. Dolls with missing eyes, a worn teddy bear, building blocks scattered like forgotten dreams. He sifted through them, his fingers tracing the contours of each object. He found it tucked away in a corner, a small, wooden horse, its paint chipped and faded. Sarah had named it Lightning. He remembered her riding it around the yard, her imagination transforming the dusty ground into a vast prairie. He took the horse and, after a moment's thought, grabbed a handful of bright red apples from a basket near the barn door. As darkness fell, Dusty walked along the fence line, keeping to the shadows. The Jenkins house was dark, the only sound the chirping of crickets. He reached a spot where the fence sagged slightly, hidden by a thicket of thorny bushes. He placed the toy horse and the apples on the ground, right next to the fence post, a silent offering in the fading light. He lingered for a moment, watching the dark outline of the house. Then he turned and walked back towards his own land, the image of Lily May, her small shoulders slumped, etched in his mind. He didn't know why he'd done it. He only knew he couldn't stand by and do nothing. The ghost might still haunt him, but maybe, just maybe, he could offer a little bit of light to someone else in the darkness. Whispers of woe. The next morning, the air hung thick and heavy with the promise of rain. Dusty watched from the porch as Lily May trudged towards the woodpile, her shoulders slumped. He'd left the toy horse and apples near the fence post again, half hidden beneath a scraggly bush. He held his breath. She saw them. Her steps faltered. For a long moment, she just stared, as if unsure if they were real. Then, cautiously, she approached, her eyes darting towards the house, as if expecting someone to snatch them away. Her small hand reached out, fingers brushing the painted mane of the toy horse. She picked it up, turning it over in her palm, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. She clutched the horse to her chest, then quickly grabbed the apples, stuffing them into the deep pockets of her worn dress. She risked a glance towards the house, then another, briefer one in Dusty's direction before scurrying back to her chores, the toy horse safely tucked away. Dusty felt a stirring in his chest, a warmth he hadn't felt in years. It was a small thing, a girl accepting a simple gift, but it felt monumental. Later that morning, needing supplies and wanting to hear any whispers about the Jenkins family, Dusty rode into town. The general store was as it always was, smelling of sawdust, cured meats, and something indefinably old. Old Man Hemlock was behind the counter, meticulously polishing his spectacles. Dusty, Hemlock greeted him, his voice raspy as dry leaves skittering across the ground. "Didn't expect to see you out and about so soon after your last trip." Dusty nodded, running a hand over the stubble on his chin. "Needed some things." He grabbed a basket and began to fill it with flour, coffee, and sugar. Hemlock watched him, his eyes shrewd behind the thick lenses. "Heard you've been leaving gifts by the Jenkins fence." Dusty froze, his back to the counter. "Just being neighborly," he mumbled, turning to face the old man. Hemlock chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. "Neighborly? Since when did you become so concerned with the Jenkins' well-being?" He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Especially considering the way they treat that poor girl." Dusty's grip tightened on the basket handle. "What do you know about it, Hemlock?" Hemlock sighed, pushing the spectacles higher on his nose. "More than you might think. That girl, Lily Mae, she ain't blood to the Jenkins. Came to them near 5 years ago, after her folks, well, they didn't make it through the winter. Flu took them both." Dusty leaned against a stack of crates, his gaze fixed on Hemlock. "And the Jenkins took her in?" "Took her in," Hemlock repeated, his voice laced with bitterness. "More like took her on. She works like a dog, from dawn till dusk. Never a kind word, never a thank you. Just endless chores and empty plates." He paused, his eyes clouding over. "Folks say they only kept her for the government money, then the free labor." Dusty felt a cold anger rising in his gut. Government money? Orphans' fund, they called it back then. Small pittance, barely enough to feed a cat, but enough to grease the Jenkins' pockets, I reckon. Now she's old enough to be useful. They probably figure they'll just keep her around, work her to the bone. Hemlock's gaze drifted towards the window, a flicker of something akin to pity in his eyes. "She's a quiet thing, Lily Mae. Never complains. Just keeps her head down and does what she's told. But you can see it in her eyes, Dusty. The weariness, the hopelessness." Dusty remembered the fleeting glimpse of a smile he'd seen on her face that morning, quickly extinguished. He thought of his own daughter, lost too soon, and the emptiness that still echoed in his heart. He realized he'd been projecting, seeing his own grief reflected in the girl's eyes. But Hemlock's words painted a starker, more painful picture. He paid for his supplies in silence, Hemlock's words hanging heavy in the air. As he turned to leave, Hemlock cleared his throat. "Dusty," he said, his voice softer now, "just be careful. The Jenkins ain't the kind to take kindly to folks interfering in their business." Dusty nodded, his jaw tight. He mounted his horse. The image of Lily Mae's tired eyes burned into his mind. The rain started to fall, a light drizzle that quickly turned into a downpour. He urged his horse forward, the whispers of woe following him all the way back to the ranch. Helping hands. The next morning, the rooster's crow found Dusty already saddling Buck. He bypassed his usual patrol of the South 40, instead turning Buck's head towards the Jenkins place. Hemlock's words echoed in his mind. "They're mean-spirited folk, Dusty. Best to steer clear." But the image of Lily Mae's tired eyes, the way she flinched at Jedediah's barked commands, spurred him onward. The Jenkins farmyard was a scene of organized chaos. Jedediah, his face florid with exertion, wrestled with a stubborn mule hitched to a hay wagon. Martha stood on the porch, arms crossed, a permanent frown etched into her face. Lily May was nowhere to be seen. Dusty reined in Buck near the fence. "Mornin', Jenkins. Need a hand with that hay." Jedediah paused, wiping sweat from his brow with a grimy forearm. He squinted at Dusty, suspicion clouding his features. "Rivers, ain't it? Didn't expect to see you round these parts." "Got some free time," Dusty said, keeping his tone casual. "Figure I could lend a hand. 2 backs are better than 1, especially in this heat." The July sun already beat down, promising another scorcher. Martha descended from the porch, her gaze sharp and assessing. "What's the catch, Rivers? Nobody does anything for free." Dusty met her gaze, unflinching. "No catch, just neighborly help. Always been the way around here, hasn't it?" He let the unspoken history of shared hardship hang in the air. Jedediah grunted. "Don't need no charity." But Dusty saw the flicker of calculation in his eyes. He likely knew that getting the hay in before the afternoon storms was crucial. "Suit yourself," Dusty said, turning Buck as if to leave. "Hold on," Jedediah said, his voice grudging. "Don't hurt to have another set of hands. But don't expect payment." Dusty dismounted, tying Buck to the fence. Didn't expect any. He climbed onto the wagon, the scent of dry hay filling his nostrils. "Where's the girl?" he asked, pitching a forkful of hay. Jedediah jerked his head towards the barn. "Mucking stalls. What's it to you?" Dusty ignored the gruffness and focused on the task at hand. They worked in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon, the mule's heavy breathing, and the rhythmic pitch of the hay. Dusty's muscles remembered the work, the familiar ache, a welcome distraction from the gnawing emptiness within him. Finally, Jedediah stopped, leaning on his pitchfork. "All right, Rivers, I reckon that's enough for now. Appreciate the help." Dusty wiped his own brow. "Glad to do it. Mind if I fetch some water from your well?" Jedediah shrugged. "Help yourself." Dusty walked towards the well, the wooden planks cool beneath his boots. He pumped the handle, the familiar squeak echoing in the yard. As he drank, he saw Lily May emerge from the barn, carrying 2 overflowing buckets. Her shoulders slumped with the weight, and her face was streaked with dirt. He approached her. "Let me give you a hand with those," he said softly, reaching for one of the buckets. Lily May startled, her eyes widening. She hesitated for a moment, then relinquished the bucket. "Thank you, Mr. Rivers." Her voice was barely a whisper. They walked in silence towards the pig pen, the only sound the slosh of water in the remaining bucket. As she poured the water into the trough, Dusty spoke. "You're working hard, Lily May." She didn't meet his eyes. "Just doing what I'm told." Dusty knelt, pretending to examine the latch on the pigpen gate. "It gets easier," he said, his voice low, "knowing you're not alone." She glanced at him, a flicker of something, hope, in her eyes. But then Martha's voice cut through the air. "Lily May, get back to the house. I need you to start on the laundry." Lily May flinched and quickly turned away, her face once again blank. "Yes, ma'am." She scurried towards the house, the empty bucket swinging from her hand. Dusty watched her go, a knot forming in his stomach. He straightened, his gaze hardening. He knew he couldn't rush things. He needed to tread carefully, gain their trust, if he was going to help Lily May. This was just the beginning. Secrets in the barn. The next day, the sun was a brutal eye in the sky, baking the fields. Dusty finished his chores early, a restless energy simmering beneath his skin. He told himself he was checking the fence line bordering the Jenkins property, but his boots knew better, leading him straight to their dilapidated barn. He found Lily May inside, mucking out stalls with a weariness that belied her age. The air hung thick with the smells of hay, manure, and dust, a symphony of farm life that usually brought him a sense of peace. Today, it just amplified the unfairness of it all. "Afternoon, Lily May," he said, leaning against a post, trying to appear casual. She jumped, a flicker of fear in her eyes before she recognized him. "Mr. Rivers, you startled me." She wiped a streak of dirt across her forehead, leaving a muddy smudge. Just checking on a fence, he lied easily. Figured I'd say hello. She nodded, unconvinced but polite. Ma's inside, baking bread. That's so. Dusty scanned the barn. Say, I was cleaning out my tack room the other day. Found some old books. Figured someone might want them. You like to read? Lily Mae's eyes widened, a spark igniting in their depths. Read? I ain't never really learned. Dusty felt a pang in his chest. Well, now's your chance. Got an old primer, some stories. Nothing fancy, but it's a start. He gestured towards a shadowed corner. Got 'em in my saddlebag by the door. Why don't you take a look? She hesitated, glancing towards the house. Ma would tan my hide if she knew I was shirking. Just for a minute, Dusty urged softly. No harm in looking. Lily Mae cautiously approached the saddlebag, her fingers tracing the worn leather before she reached inside and pulled out a small, battered book. Its cover depicted a bright red apple. She opened it reverently, her brow furrowing at the unfamiliar symbols. That's an Dusty said, pointing. Apple starts with a. He spent the next hour crouched beside her, patiently sounding out letters, drawing them in the dust with a stick. Lily Mae was a quick study, her mind sharp despite her lack of schooling. The initial fear in her eyes gradually faded, replaced by a quiet determination. The sun shifted, casting long shadows across the barn floor. Lily Mae sighed, reluctantly closing the book. I gotta get back. Ma will be looking for me. All right, Dusty said, but we can do this again, if you want. Her face lit up. Really, he confirmed. Same time tomorrow. She nodded eagerly. I'll be here. As she turned to leave, Dusty stopped her. Lily Mae, he said, his voice low. What do you dream about? She paused, her gaze fixed on the barn door. For a moment, he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, in a hushed voice, she said, I dream of leaving this place, of going somewhere where the sun don't burn so hot, and the work ain't so hard. Somewhere free. The word hung in the air, heavy with longing. Dusty met her gaze, seeing a reflection of his own yearning for escape, for a life unburdened by grief. That a good dream, Lily Mae, he said softly. Don't you ever let it go. The next few weeks fell into a rhythm. Dusty would arrive at the barn around the same time each afternoon, his saddlebag filled with books and paper. Lily Mae would steal away from her chores, her eyes shining with anticipation. They worked in secret, whispering words and tracing letters in the dust, the barn their sanctuary from the harsh realities of their lives. Dusty taught her to read simple sentences, then paragraphs, then short stories. He showed her how to write her name, a skill that filled her with a quiet pride. One afternoon, Lily Mae hesitated before opening the primer. Mr. Rivers, she began, her voice barely above a whisper. Why are you doing this? Why are you helping me? Dusty looked at her, his gaze unwavering. Because you deserve it, Lily Mae. Everyone deserves a chance to learn, to dream. And because, he added, a hint of sadness in his voice, someone once did this for me. He didn't elaborate. He didn't need to. She understood. He saw her potential, that hidden spark, and recognized that she, too, was fighting to not be swallowed by the darkness that had threatened to consume him. Locked away. The late afternoon sun cast long, skeletal shadows from the cottonwoods lining the creek as Dusty rode toward the Jenkins farm. A knot of unease tightened in his gut. Lily Mae was usually waiting by the fence, her face alight with anticipation. Today, only the chickens pecked and scratched in the dust. He dismounted, the silence pressing in on him. The air, usually thick with the smells of hay and manure, felt strangely sterile. Lily Mae, he called, his voice echoing too loudly in the stillness. No answer. He walked towards the house, the screen door hanging crookedly on one hinge. He rapped on the frame, the sound sharp and demanding. Martha Jenkins appeared, her face pinched and unwelcoming. She ain't here, Martha snapped, her eyes narrowed. Gone to town, with Jedediah. Dusty's unease sharpened into suspicion. Jedediah never took Lily Mae to town. He barely acknowledged her existence, except to bark orders. I thought I saw Jedediah working on the tractor a while ago. Martha's lips tightened. Well, they went. Now, if you'll excuse me, I got work to do. She started to close the door. Hold on, Dusty said, his voice low and firm. She was expecting me. We had some chores to do together. Martha's gaze flickered, betraying her lie. She ain't your concern, Mr. Rivers. Now leave. She slammed the door, the flimsy frame rattling in protest. Dusty stood for a moment, his hand resting on the worn wood. He knew she was lying. He could feel it in the heavy, suffocating air. He walked around the house, his boots crunching on the gravel path. The barn loomed in the distance, a dark silhouette against the fading light. He hadn't seen Lily May go near the barn all week. He approached cautiously, the massive wooden doors casting an even deeper shadow. The only sound was the rustling of hay within and the frantic chirping of swallows nesting in the eaves. He tried the handle. Locked. Lily May, he called again, his voice louder this time, laced with urgency. A muffled sob, barely audible, drifted through the thick wood. Dusty's blood ran cold. He grabbed the handle and rattled it fiercely. Lily May, it's me, Dusty. Are you in there? Another sob, this one closer, followed by a weak, whispered, Dusty, help? He didn't hesitate. He scanned the barn's perimeter, spotting a rusted pitchfork leaning against the wall. He grabbed it, adrenaline coursing through his veins. He wedged the tines into the gap between the door and the frame, and with a grunt of effort he pried. The wood splintered, and the lock gave way with a loud crack. He pushed the door open, and the musty smell of hay and manure washed over him, mingled with something else, something metallic and sharp. Lily May was huddled in the corner, surrounded by bales of hay. Her face was a mask of bruises, one eye swollen shut. A thin trickle of blood ran from her split lip, staining her tattered dress. Her wrists were bound with rope, the rough fibers digging into her skin. Dusty knelt beside her, his heart clenching in his chest. Lily May, what happened? She flinched at his touch, then looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. They said I wasn't working hard enough. Jedediah. She couldn't finish the sentence, her body shaking with silent sobs. Dusty gently untied the ropes, his hands trembling with a mixture of rage and compassion. He saw the welts on her arms, the dark bruises blooming on her legs. He'd seen enough brutality in his life, fighting Apaches and surviving the Civil War. But this casual cruelty inflicted on a helpless girl ignited a fire in him he thought long extinguished. It's okay, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. You're safe now. He pulled out his handkerchief and gently dabbed at her bleeding lip. He helped her to her feet, supporting her weight as she leaned heavily against him. As they walked slowly toward the barn door, Dusty glanced back at the corner where he found her. Lying discarded on the hay was a thick leather belt. His grip tightened on Lily May's arm. He looked down at her, her face pale and drawn, her eyes wide with fear. We're leaving, he said, his voice a low growl. Tonight, a father's stand. The air was a humid blanket, thick with the reek of fertilizer and the promise of rain. The stench clung to Dusty as he approached the Jenkins' dilapidated farmhouse. The lone porch light spilled a jaundiced beam, failing to dispel the encroaching darkness that seemed to fester around the place. He bypassed the formality of a knock, nudging the door inward and stepping into the cramped, chaotic living room. Martha was bent over a mending basket, her face a topography of wrinkles, each line a testament to years of toil and, he suspected, a cruel nature. Jedediah occupied an armchair, a whiskey bottle sweating on the floor beside him, its amber contents half gone. Heads snapped up, surprise giving way to hardened recognition. Rivers, Jedediah slurred, his voice gravelly with drink. What in the blazes you think you're doing, barging in like this? Dusty stood firm, his gaze unwavering. I'm here about Lily May. Martha's hands froze. Her gaze skittered away, focusing on a loose thread marring an old quilt. Jedediah, emboldened by the liquor, smirked. That little hellion? What's she stirred up now? She's endured enough, Dusty countered, his tone a low growl. I saw her, Jedediah, the wheels crisscrossing her back, the purple blooming on her arms. I know what's been happening. The blood drained from Martha's face, replaced by a ghastly pallor. Jedediah's face, however, burned crimson. With effort, he hauled himself upright, swaying slightly. Are you calling me a liar, Rivers? You've got no business coming in here, throwing around accusations. I'm not calling you anything, Dusty said, his voice a hone blade. I'm stating what I observed, and I'm telling you it ends. Here, now. Jedediah advanced, his breath a noxious blend of whiskey and stale tobacco. Think you could just waltz in here and dictate what I do on my own property? That girl's an orphan. She should be grateful we took her in. Grateful? Dusty scoffed, a harsh sound rasping from his throat. You call that gratitude? Confining her to the barn like some animal? Bruising her until she's a pallet of pain? Finally, Martha spoke, her voice a thin, defensive whine. She's a recalcitrant child. She needs discipline. Dusty pivoted, his eyes blazing with righteous anger. Discipline isn't an excuse for abuse. She's a child, Martha. A terrified, solitary child who needs compassion, not brutality. He caught a fleeting expression in her eyes, a brief spark of remorse, quickly extinguished. She's family, Jedediah spat. We'll raise her how we see fit. Dusty's fists clenched, the knuckles white. He struggled to quell his rising anger, knowing violence was a futile solution. I'm offering you a chance to set things right, he stated, his voice strained. Release her. Let her live somewhere safe, somewhere cherished. Jedediah threw his head back, a booming guffaw erupting from his chest. You think we'll simply give her away? She's labor. She earns her keep on this farm. Reaching into his pocket, Dusty retrieved a thick roll of bills. He peeled off several and extended them. I'll compensate you for her upkeep. I'll pay you for every task she's done, every burden she's been. The laughter died in Jedediah's throat, replaced by a calculating gaze. Martha's eyes widened, flickering between the wad of money and her husband's face. How much? Jedediah inquired, a mercantile edge sharpening his voice. Dusty tossed the bills onto the scarred table. That's just the opening bid. I'll give you $500. For Lily Mae. A weighty silence descended, broken only by the popping and spitting of the fire in the hearth. Jedediah's eyes were fixed on the money, his fingers twitching with avarice. Martha's breath hitched, shallow and rapid. 500, Jedediah finally managed, his voice thick with covetousness. She's worth more than that. She's a strong worker. She's a child, Dusty reiterated, his tone hardening. And I'm offering you a way out. A way to conclude this without further complication. He added another $100 to the burgeoning pile. 600. That's my absolute limit. Jedediah licked his chapped lips, his gaze riveted to the cash. He glanced at Martha, who gave the barest, almost imperceptible nod. All right, Rivers, Jedediah conceded, a cunning smile twisting his lips. You have a deal. A new home. A miasma of distrust clung to the air in the Jenkins parlor, heavier than the dust motes waltzing in the meager sunlight that squeezed through the grimy window pane. Jedediah, despite the room's coolness, felt perspiration bead on his forehead as he examined the adoption papers Dusty presented. Martha loomed behind, her presence a faint exhale of sour milk and apprehension. $600, Jedediah croaked, his rough thumb tracing the sum inscribed on the page. And this here, adoption, makes it all above board and legal. Dusty held his gaze. Legally binding. Signed, sealed, and notarized. A hefty fee secured prompt service from a Harmony Creek lawyer. He'd left nothing to chance. Martha's voice emerged, a thin, querulous whine. She ain't been any bother, Mr. Rivers. Just high-spirited. Needs a firm hand is all. Dusty swallowed the sharp retort that rose in his throat, refusing to dignify her fabrications. Just sign the papers, please. The act of signing was labored. Jedediah's name sprawled across the page, a shaky, indecisive scribble, while Martha's resembled a child's first attempts at penmanship. With each stroke, Dusty felt a tightening cord in his chest loosen. Once the final signature had dried, Dusty carefully folded the documents and secured them within his coat. "I'll fetch her things," Martha offered, a strange glint flickering in her eyes. "I'll get them," Dusty countered, his tone leaving no room for debate. He wouldn't relinquish sight of Lily May for another moment. He shadowed Martha to the cramped, Spartan space Lily May called her own. It held little: a cot, a wobbly chair, and a small chest scarred by time. A faded, threadbare quilt lay bunched on the narrow bed. Dusty scoot twisted. Martha began to rifle through the drawers, pulling out meager garments, patched dresses, worn trousers, and thin underthings. Dusty halted her. "Leave them," he stated softly. "We'll buy her new." He couldn't bear the thought of Lily May carrying these tattered reminders of neglect. He noticed a small, wooden doll tucked beneath the pillow. Lifting it, he saw it was crudely fashioned, its painted features faded and chipped. Yet, the simple black dots that serve as eyes held a surprising glimmer of tenacity. He slipped it into his pocket. When Lily May was led into the parlor, she appeared even smaller than before. Her eyes were huge and cautious, her shoulders drawn inward as if braced for a blow. She hugged a small, fabric sack to her chest, its contents a mystery. Dusty knelt before her, his expression gentle. "Lily May," he began, his voice a low, soothing murmur. "We're going home now." She remained silent, offering no nod. But as Dusty clasped her hand, he felt a delicate shiver course through her, a tentative spark of hope flickering to life. The drive to the ranch unfolded in silence. Lily May sat beside him in the cab, her gaze locked on the blur of the passing scenery. The waning sun cast elongated shadows across the fields, bathing the landscape in hues of ochre and gold. Dusty maintained a slow, deliberate pace, allowing her time to acclimate. As they approached the ranch, Dusty gestured toward the vast pastures, the grazing livestock, the distant blue-tinged mountains. "This is it, Lily May," he said, "your new home." The ranch house, a robust, two-story dwelling constructed of aged timber and stone, rested in the embrace of a cottonwood grove. Plumes of smoke drifted from the chimney, promising warmth and solace. Dusty brought the truck to a halt before the house and assisted Lily May as she climbed down. For a long moment, she stood motionless, her eyes darting about, absorbing the unfamiliar panorama. A soft breeze whispered through the cottonwood leaves, creating a tranquil melody. "It's big," she breathed, her voice a mere thread of sound. Dusty smiled gently. "It is, but it's also safe, and it's yours if you want it." He guided her inside. The house was sparsely adorned, yet immaculate and welcoming. A cheerful fire danced in the hearth, casting a golden radiance about the room. The mingled scents of wood smoke and pine filled the air. He led her to her room, a luminous, cheerful space, with a generous window overlooking the sprawling fields. A brand-new bed, adorned with a brightly patterned quilt, stood against one wall. Beside the window sat a small table and chair, and a bookcase filled with well-loved books lined the corner. Lily May lingered in the doorway, her eyes wide with disbelief. Is this really for me?" Dusty affirmed with a nod. "It is, Lily May, every bit of it, and more. This is your home now, and I promise you, no one will ever cause you harm here." He recognized the fear still lingering in her eyes, but he also glimpsed something nascent, a fragile ember of hope, a delicate tendril of trust. He understood that healing, that learning to believe again, would require time. But he possessed an abundance of patience. He had all the time in the world to offer. Blossoming lily. The silence that had clung to Lily May began to fray, like the edges of a well-worn blanket. Dusty, attuned to the subtle shifts in her demeanor, nurtured the burgeoning threads of her personality with patient hands. He spoke to her not as a child rescued, but as a partner in a shared life, explaining the rhythms of the ranch, the needs of the animals, the changing seasons. One crisp autumn morning, the air smelling of pine and damp earth, Dusty led Lily May to the corral. Inside stood a gentle mare named Belle, her coat the color of burnished copper. Lily May hung back, her fingers twisting in the hem of her new denim dress. "She's a good girl, Lily May," Dusty said, his voice low and reassuring. "Gentle as a lamb. Would you like to meet her?" Lily May hesitated, then nodded slowly. Dusty took her hand and led her to Belle, stroking the mare's velvety nose. He showed Lily May how to offer her palm, flat and open, for Belle to sniff. The mare's warm breath tickled Lily May's skin, and a hesitant smile flickered across her face. Dusty spent the next few weeks teaching Lily May the basics of horsemanship. He never pushed her, allowing her to set the pace. At first, she was timid, clinging to the saddle horn as if her life depended on it. But slowly, with Dusty's quiet encouragement, she began to relax, finding a rhythm with Belle's gait. The wind whipped through her hair, and the vast expanse of the prairie stretched before her, an open invitation. For the first time, Lily May felt a sense of freedom she had never known. Riding became their ritual. Every afternoon, after Lily May finished her lessons, Dusty had hired a tutor who came to the ranch 3 times a week. They would saddle up and ride out into the open country. Dusty pointed out the different types of birds, the tracks of deer and coyotes, the constellations that wheeled across the night sky. Lily May, in turn, began to share her own observations, her voice gaining strength and confidence with each passing day. She wasn't just learning to ride. She was learning to trust, to believe in herself, to find joy in the simple things. The ranch, once a symbol of Dusty's solitude, was becoming a haven for them both. Lily May also took to ranch chores with surprising enthusiasm. She learned to milk the cows, collect eggs from the hen house, and tend to the vegetable garden Dusty had planted. Her small hands, once clumsy and hesitant, became nimble and efficient. She took pride in her work, her face lighting up whenever she mastered a new skill. One evening, after a long day of mending fences, Dusty and Lily May sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. Lily May leaned against Dusty, her head resting on his shoulder. "Dusty," she said softly, "thank you." Dusty wrapped his arm around her, pulling her closer. "For what, Lily May?" "For everything," she replied. "For giving me a home, for teaching me to ride, for being my family." Dusty's throat tightened. He had never expected to feel this way again, to experience the warmth of familial love. He looked down at Lily May, her face bathed in the golden light of the setting sun, and saw not a rescued orphan, but a daughter, a companion, a beacon of hope in his life. "You're my family too, Lily May," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "And I wouldn't have it any other way." Time, like the changing seasons, continued its relentless march. The small, frightened girl who had arrived at the ranch gradually transformed into a confident young woman. Lily May blossomed under Dusty's unwavering care. She excelled in her studies, devoured books, and developed a passion for painting, capturing the beauty of the prairie on canvas. Years later, the sun beat down on the parched earth. Dusty, his hair now streaked with silver, stood beside Lily May, her hand resting in his. She was no longer the waif he had rescued, but a vibrant, strong woman, her eyes shining with intelligence and determination. Her laughter carried on the wind. The lines of worry that had etched themselves into his face began to soften, replaced by a quiet contentment. Lily May had enrolled in agricultural college, eager to learn the latest techniques in ranching and sustainable farming. She was determined to use her knowledge to improve the ranch and give back to the community that had embraced her. As they stood there, surveying the land that had become their shared legacy, Dusty knew that he had not only saved Lily May, but she had saved him. She had breathed new life into his world, filling the void left by loss and grief. He looked at her, at the woman she had become. A profound sense of gratitude washed over him. He had given her a home, but she had given him a reason to live again. And together, they had created a life filled with love, laughter, and the unwavering belief in the power of kindness.